What is your purpose?
I think my purpose is to make the complicated simple.
My guest today is Lisa Pritchard, the Director of Tax Services at Holman Hodge. Lisa is a passionate South Australian who has worked with small to medium businesses for more than 20 years.
But there are some people who struggle to build those teams, and I think that's where you can have problems, furthering your career.
As a taxation specialist, she assists all types of businesses to ensure compliance with the complex tax laws that govern Australia. Lisa has also worked with many businesses at differing stages, establishing their businesses, developing and growing their businesses, and business sales or transitioning out of a business. Especially passionate about women in business in South Australia, Lisa works with several entrepreneurial women that she works closely with to assist them in enhancing their businesses.
I've never felt like anyone that I've worked with has held me back or looked at me differently because I do have children. I do have children and I've worked part-time. I still work part-time.
Hi, I'm Sarah Bartholomew's from YouLegal. The Accountants on Purpose podcast showcases inspiring accountants who are leaders in their field.
And then it just came to me like a bolt of blue.
What makes them tick?
Love it.
How did they get to where they are?
I want to inspire.
And what do they do now for their teams, their clients, and the world?
Finish this sentence. I would be the happiest person in the world if.
Well, as of late this morning, the simplest answer to that would be if the border to Melbourne and Adelaide reopened, because my sister's supposed to be visiting for the first time in almost 2 years in 2 weeks' time.
No.
So we've been watching with
COVID closures.
Yeah, she's coming over to celebrate my mum's 70th, and we've booked a few tickets to a few shows. So that's a very of the moment happiest thing. But it's actually it does make you reflect on how, happiness and what that means has sort of changed over the last 10
year
months.
Or so.
And I think ultimately, short of borders closing and not being able to travel as freely, not having plans change at the last minute would be nice. But also, if I could maintain the balance, I think, that we've got back in the last 10 months, if I could maintain that going forward, I would be really happy about that.
Wow, that's a great answer. And you're right, it's been very difficult, particularly for families. My sister was meant to get married last September in New York. She couldn't come back for Christmas. The wedding's been delayed and it'll be delayed again, I'm sure.
Yeah, holidays gone. Yeah, this time a year ago, I might have said if I could take my children to do their first overseas holiday, which was planned for last year, but to show them another culture and another world and, help them understand what it's like to live in Australia. Well, now it's a slightly, see how lucky they are to be in Australia, but for a completely different reason from being travelling overseas. It's for watching what's going on overseas.
Yeah.
I think we hit the jackpot for the moment.
Totally.
Anyway. So, I think the view of happiness has changed a bit over the last year.
Yeah. So since we can't travel at the moment, can you tell us about the most transformative travel experience that you've ever had?
I think all travel's transformative in some, or maybe that's just us and the way we travel. It's always to sort of to learn something, to see things, to try new things. There's all kinds of different travel experiences and things that have happened that have made me think differently. My husband and I were lucky enough years ago now to go to Lord Howe Island, which is a World Heritage listed island off the coast of New South Wales.
Yes.
And there's no cars. You ride your bike wherever you go, or the odd fancy resort has a golf cart, but we didn't stay in the fancy resort. So you walk or you ride a bike wherever you go, and it's quiet and it's peaceful, and you just be. But the surroundings are amazing, and the lagoons and the fish and the wildlife is just astounding. You think that's an hour's flight from Sydney or an hour and a half flight from Sydney. So talk about appreciating your own stuff on your own doorstep. But then going to a place like Thailand and Bangkok in particular, where I remember I had a real struggle with we visited the Grand Palace, as a lot of people do when if you go to Bangkok, and the sheer opulence of that place just astounded me. And then when you walk outside the door, the poverty that people live in, I think, well, could you not dismantle the Grand Palace and sell some of the gold and make everybody richer? Those sorts of things are really they're quite confronting. I think I find them confronting because I don't know how to fix. You can't fix that sort of thing, but it feels like there's part of me that thinks, well, that doesn't feel right, and so yeah, lots of different experiences, and if you go out to travel to look for different things, you'll always find something that changes your life when you come home and think about things differently or do things differently.
I had a similar experience to your Thailand experience when I went to Cambodia, and I hadn't really, until I got there, appreciated that everyone who was educated had been massacred.
Right.
And so the children didn't have people to educate them, and there's no exportable products that Cambodia had. So no one's other international countries don't have the interest in helping them that they might if they did.
Yeah.
And I just felt so helpless there, like how, with no educational institutions and no one being interested in helping you particularly, is it ever going to change?
And there's a lot in that sort of Southeast Asian pocket, I think. But it's confronting.
And now there's no tourism.
Yeah, now there's no tourism, which is, even Thailand. I mean, there's a lot going on in Thailand, but Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos and all those other countries who rely a lot on people going to visit. Yeah. Not great.
No. On another note, what makes you laugh?
Lola makes me laugh. Lola is our 2-year-old Labrador, and she's just hilarious. They're such funny dogs. They have so much personality. But it's not only her and her little oddities and the things that she chooses to chew and the things that she won't touch, and her absolute adoration for our whole family is just hilarious. Like every morning you would think she's not seen us for,
she missed you while you were asleep.
And I think it's maybe because she's waiting for breakfast and she wants to be fed.
Labradors are notoriously hungry, aren't they?
They are. They're very easy to train because all they want to do is eat. So that's fine. But it's also the big shift that she's had on our family. So, it's not just laughing at Lola, but it's laughing at the kids with Lola and even my husband with Lola and the way they all interact. She's changed the dynamic of our family completely and just given us something else, I guess, to focus on other than ourselves for starters.
Yes.
Particularly when kids are sort of at that 8-10 sort of age.
Yes.
It's in our family, I felt it was very much about them. It was great to bring a dog in and give them a little bit of responsibility.
Yeah,
and it
that's
became
true.
if you well, we can do all of this, but we can go out and but what are we going to do with the dog? Is she going to come with us or is she going to leave us? And it's changed our family a lot. Everyone's a lot more, I think it chilled everybody out a lot, but just giving people someone else to worry about other than themselves, particularly the kids, because I don't think the kids do have anyone to worry about other than themselves. That's just the way you are when you're a kid. So I was concerned that it would give me a whole lot
of work. And
it hasn't. It's worked really well.
Everyone's sharing the load.
Everyone's sharing the load. And, we have a lot of fun. We go for a lot of walks. We do a lot of stuff together now with the dog that, we didn't go for a walk at 7:00 on a Tuesday night ordinarily. But if Lola's being a bit crazy and it's a beautiful night, let's take her to the park. And so, I think she's my number one laugh material.
That's awesome.
Yeah, fun.
We don't have pets, but we're thinking of getting a stick insect. It seems like because I'm really worried about that work thing. They eat gum leaves.
That should be doable.
You clean out their tank, I think, once a week or so.
Do you get a couple?
I don't know, because then you might end up with 30.
Yeah, I have heard that. But then I've heard the children sell the stick insects.
Oh, and they become
make
entrepreneurs.
Money. Yeah. the baby insects, stick insects, not always easy to find. I don't know.
There you
at all.
go.
So it could be a very interesting,
Lucrative opportunity for my kids.
It could be. They could learn a lot.
All right, watch this space. So you're the Director of Tax Services at Holman Hodge. Can you talk about your accounting journey and what got you to where you are now?
I've always sort of believed, and I tell people who I work with and who I counsel and mentor and coach, to always take any opportunities that present themselves whenever they come up in your career. I went through year 12 and I was never a sciencey kind of person. I sort of grasped onto the accounting, economics, legal studies, English sort of side of things, which I really, really enjoyed, which led to a Bachelor of Commerce, which was pretty, easy. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And I changed my mind, and I think I changed my mind because I think I like the practicality of accounting at uni a bit more than the reading that's involved in law, which is a little bit strange because I've ended up in tax law, which is still a lot of reading, a lot of legislation. So I'm still kind of there. But I decided took the 3-year path instead of the 5-year path, and came out as a graduate and found a job as a graduate accountant, and then decided that I really liked the technical aspect. So I started in business services, but I wanted to know the whys behind things. So yes, that's deductible. No, it's not. Well, what says it's deductible and where's, and sort of at a graduate sort of 1 year, 2 year level, you do just assume a lot of that. You sort of get taught to assume a lot of that stuff. And I didn't like those assumptions. So I wanted to delve into it a bit more, which I could do. I was encouraged to, but you still have to hit your chargeable hours at that age and do. So I found a job. I applied for a job at KPMG in their corporate tax division. So I moved into there and worked with KPMG for 5 years. So got a really good opportunity to. I just did their structured tax training, and I learned a lot about tax and how you read law and all that sort of stuff, which I really quite enjoyed, and had some great client opportunities as well. But at that stage, as a manager in KPMG, never really saw myself as a Big Four partner in an accounting firm, and sort of went through that. Where am I going to go?
And who am I?
Yeah, what am I going to do? What do I like doing?
Yes.
And landed a job so started applying for some different jobs, but with a training focus, and landed a job in Sydney. At the time, I was at BDO in Sydney as the technical training manager for business services. So I had a job in Sydney for 3 years where I had no chargeable hour targets, no clients. All I did was the technical training for the business services group and consulted. Yeah. So if someone had a sticky question that they needed a bit of research done on, I would do that research. I loved that job. That was great fun, but that was never going to last because it was probably the cushiest.
Sounds like a dream.
I don't know if it was the cushiest job, but I just really loved it.
Yeah,
so
because you can throw yourself into things and not worry about how long things are taking, and like go down rabbit holes.
And work with other people, and I worked out that I did love training. I love training people, so I've always sort of that sort of stuck with me. Now, when I came back, I landed a job with MHM and joined them as a manager. So I went back into business services as manager, but it didn't take long for me to move into the tax technical space with them and look after a bit of training and consulting. So I've always had a lesser client base because I do the consulting for the rest of the firm or work with the rest of the firm. And I've always liked that. It gives a good
overview
mix.
As well.
Yeah, but I've always had an interest in training, and I do train. I do presentations for lots of organisations, have done for years, and I really like it. And I find it, if I can present, I like the challenge of presenting on technical topics, but that takes a lot of time because a lot of the technical presentations I do, you're standing in front of a group of other accountants and lawyers, so you want to make sure you're right.
Yes.
So there's a bit more added pressure for me that comes with that side of things. But I do love, I have done some presentations for female entrepreneurs who are setting up brand new businesses, and it's just around finance, and I can talk about that stuff until
cows come home.
For hours. And I find that really easy, so I really enjoy it. So it's a low, I don't have to spend a lot of time preparing for it, but I feel like
the back of your hand. But you get
So for an effort reward, I feel like I get a lot more reward from that than I do spending days and days and days preparing a technical presentation.
And they're going to get so much out of it.
Yeah, yeah. And presenting to other accountants and lawyers is good. There's a place for that, I think, and there's, knowing who knows what and who you can go to and who you can ask questions to. But I do like, that's a different style. So I've always done that, been involved with the Institute of Chartered Accountants and the different things that they do. I ended up being involved in 3 mergers in 5 years through accounting practices, and that sort of shook things up a bit. I wasn't always happy with where I landed and
it's distracting as well.
It's very distracting, and it also happened at the time where I had children, so it almost did work out okay.
Also, lots of other things changing in your life.
Yeah, so I didn't take huge chunks of maternity leave with my children. I took 6 months with both. I think with my first, I probably took 4, and then I sort of started going back into the office for 2 half days a week, just because
they slept well. And
and my mum was happy to give it a crack, and I just wanted to go and see people, talk to people, and part of my job was I knew I wanted to stay technical, even if I wasn't necessarily reading the legislation in detail. I wanted to know what was going on, and to be connected. That was always really important to me. And a very early conversation with my husband was that I'm going to work. I'm not going to be a stay-at-home mum. I will work through, and we'll work that out. And he was open to him staying home, and he did for a while as well. So that was quite an interesting time in my career. But I ultimately ended up then as a partner at BDO. So through a couple of mergers, left MHM and then Deloitte, and then went into PKF, which merged with BDO.
Yes.
So I sort of went through this. My mum and dad still don't know where I work.
That would have been confusing.
Never quite worked it out.
Just never caught up.
No. So I sort of stopped there, and I was there for 5 years. But I always really liked the guys I worked with at MHM and had a strong affinity with them. But it wasn't strong enough to keep me at Deloitte, because going back to my earlier comment, I just never thought I would be a partner in a Big 4 firm, and I kind of knew that, but went for the ride. And when I felt ready and the guys had actually left Deloitte and started their own practice, which was Holman Hodge, I started talking to Paul about, whether there would be a place, and there was, which was fantastic. So I feel like I'm sort of home again.
Yeah.
Home again with these guys.
Right
so I think, people say, how long have you worked with these guys? It's like, well, at Holman Hodge 4 years, but I met them in 2006 and spent a good 5 years with them then. So it's been a bit disjointed, but I'm very happy with where I am now. The guys that when I was at MHM and on maternity leave for the first time, they promoted me from manager to director while I was on mat leave. I've never felt like anyone that I've worked with has held me back or looked at me differently, because I do have children. I do have children, and I've worked part-time. I still work part-time, much to my husband's dismay. I said I'm never going back full-time. I'm staying 4 days a week. I quite like it now. But I did 3 days a week for a long time, for sort of 5 years while my kids were young and quite little. But my husband's always been fully supportive, and we've just worked. It's not I've never felt like looking after kids or family responsibilities or all of that. I've never felt like that's only my
responsibility
and my responsibility. And whenever I do, my husband's like, hello, there's 2 of us. So, I'll sit there and say, well, I've got a meeting till 7, so I'm not going to do this and we can't get that. He's like, well, I'll just work from home. Okay.
We're a team.
Yes, works well. So I do, every now and then I do get sucked into this whole I have to fix everything.
Do everything.
But I don't, and probably the reason why I've managed to sort of work through and end up where I have is because I've taken that help along the way. But yeah, I love it. I love the technical stuff. Working with great people is the key, and I've learnt so much at every practice that I've worked at, and lots of different people I've worked with. You take away the good and the bad.
Definitely.
You learn a lot.
You do. So what has been the biggest learning curve that you've experienced?
I think, going back to what I just said, that I can't do everything myself, and I can't be all things to all people.
Yes.
And that works.
So is that boundary setting then, do you think?
It's it is to a degree. It's also getting comfortable with not being, knowing that you're not all things to everybody as well. So from a professional perspective, that's, a client will ring and they'll want something and I'll say, sure. And after a little bit you think, right, but that's not me. I'm not the person to provide that. You need to talk to a lawyer, you need to talk to a financier, you need to talk to a broker, you need to talk to a counsellor, it's building that network around you of people that you trust, who work the same way you work, who will treat your clients the same way you'll treat your clients, so that I can step back and be across it
and say, I've thought of this, about this since we spoke, and this is the best person to help you with this.
Yep. And Adelaide is a really collegiate place, I find. So I have networks for all sorts of different things. There might be at least 10 lawyers that I work with around town, and depending on my client, depends on who I will refer them to. Same with financial planners, depending on who they are, depends on whose names I'll give them to have a chat to. So it's partly that, but it's also partly, when you've worked in Adelaide for a while, I've got a strong technical network as well. So if I get really stuck on a technical issue, I know that I can ring. There's a few partners around the place and managers that I know that I can ring, and I can talk to them, and they're not going to think, oh God, I can't believe she didn't know the answer.
But they can do
that.
The same thing to you.
They can do the same thing to me. You sort of get that, especially if it's someone who's dealt with it before, and because we do a lot of training, not as much face-to-face in the last 12 months, but there's a lot of discussion groups and a lot of opportunities to network, particularly across the tax network. You get to know where people's specialties lie, and you think, oh, I'll just give her a quick call and just see if she can point me in the right direction, or if I'm way off base. And sometimes that's all you need. And someone says, yeah, you're right, there is a case, this is what it is, and have a look at it. So that's really important. But I think the other thing, there's sort of three parts to it with, your professional general network, my technical network, but the other one is building that team around you in the office. And that's what saves you. If you've got to leave the office at 4:00 in the afternoon, be it because you've got a sick child, or your mum's sick, or something's happened to someone somewhere, whatever reason it is that anyone has to leave the office in a hurry, you can't be the only person that knows what's going on with something. And if you build that team around you, and that team likes you and trusts you and enjoys working with you, and I've been part of that team for other people. I still am. I mean, our fellow partners and stuff, you will drop anything to help them when something needs to be done. But there are some people who struggle to build those teams, and I think that's where you can have problems, furthering your career, because you really need people who are happy to go into bat for you when you need that to happen. And that's not an accident. That doesn't just happen. It's, you have to work at that, and you have to train people, and you have to invest in people, and you have to sit back sometimes and go, it'd be so much easier if I did this myself. I know it would be, but I'm not going to. Because I guarantee you the only time things go wrong is when I've sat in my office and gone, I'll just do this one myself. And invariably I'll forget. Something will slip through because I've decided not to share it with anybody else in the office. And then I take on all that stress as well and the pressure for it. And I think if I'd only just given that to someone a week ago, it'd be done by now. So, I know that that's the only time I tend to get myself into trouble, is when I decide to do it on my own. So if you share it, and I truly do believe a problem shared is a problem halved. It really is. You get that, just to have that support from other people is critical. And sitting outside of work, it's not being, it's, as I said before, it's not being, well, I have to sort everything out, and I have to make sure this happens and that happens, and that school shoes are bought and uniforms are bought. Well, I don't. I feel like sometimes I do, but my husband's not sitting there thinking that's fine. Lisa will do it all. He's, he might sometimes. But, it's the grandparents, it's the friends, it's the school parents, it's, everyone kicks in and helps everyone else out when they can. You just need to, you do need to ask. And once you start asking, you realise people will ask you back, and you're not, everyone's dealing with the same thing. So it's building. My biggest learning experience is just learning not to do everything on my own.
It's a great one. It really is. You're also an independent director of a medical centre, which you've had a lot of involvement with, including designing it, building it. Can you tell us about what that experience has been like?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I was about to say we're quite settled. We're probably a bit more settled now than we were about 12 months ago. But I was asked to join this board, I think it was 2012. So it's been a while. And it came through a federal government program. So had to have a board.
Yes.
Even though it was a private enterprise. It had to have a board and had to tick the diversity boxes as well. So they were on the hunt for a couple of female directors because they needed them. And through circumstance found its way to me, and I just started a new job and thought, yeah, it's something I'm interested in and something I'd like to get to know. And I've done a bit of work in the medical space as well. So it's on so many fronts has been really interesting. I mean, dealing with government departments has been interesting, especially given this particular program that existed to develop these clinics was a Labor policy. So we're now under a coalition government. So different, very different views on things, but it's almost a legacy thing that if you need help on the program, you've got to try really hard to find that person to
my goodness,
who knows enough to help you out.
It's 8 years ago now.
Yeah. So developing, plans were interesting.
Years.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, isn't it? How big do you build it? Are we going to be able to lease all the space? Are we going to be able to find enough doctors? And we hit a point, we put in this great training space that could be divided up. Of course, the great training space now is 4 consulting rooms because, yes, we could find doctors and the practice is booming. It's the clinical governance side of it has been really interesting because I've sort of always looked at medical practices from an
customer
perspective. No, accounting perspective. Well,
not a patient.
Patient perspective as well. But from when I'm in business and
numbers.
talking, it's numbers. It's about percentages and training and all of that side of things and managing your wage costs with that was sort of what I did and how I understood it to work. And clinical governance is a whole other. You're on the board now. What if you've got a doctor that's not doing a very good job, and thankfully we haven't had to deal with issues like that, but it sort of brought that side of things into focus, which is something that I'd not really thought about before. But of course, being on a board, it's the whole, and of course there's people on the board who are big on clinical governance who have never really looked into the numbers of a medical practice and how do you attract doctors and how do you retain doctors and that sort of thing. The other thing that this board introduced me to was almost a professional independent chair. So in the end, we now have an independent professional chair. He's a chair of a number of boards. He's from Melbourne, and an interest in the medical space, expertise in the medical space, but other interests and expertise as well. And he introduced me to the rigour, I guess, that can sit around a board and the minutes and the decisions and the ratifications and not only that, the strategic aspect of a board. So, there's always stuff in the paper about what's going on with, we had telehealth to deal with last year, which, we'd been toying with and setting up for telehealth and the face-to-face over internet doctor's appointments, which, and you sort of sit there and say, well, that's a no-brainer, but you just don't understand. Well, I didn't understand. It takes a while to get across all this. That's all driven by Medicare and how that works.
And how they kept changing it as well.
Yeah, and it absolutely drives behaviour. Absolutely, and it's going to be interesting because people have got used to seeing their doctor or calling their doctor.
I've just booked in for mine. Telehealth.
Yeah, cool.
She sent me a letter saying she wanted to talk about a non-urgent blood test.
Yeah.
So I'm not going there.
No. And people are going to be used to that, and it's fine. It's striking that balance, but it's not going to be as doctors are going to want people to come in.
And it is important for doctors to actually see people in person, but the behavioural chain's been set now, hasn't it? And the time efficiency and.
So that side of thing was really, really interesting last year. I mean, we had I worked out last year being on a few boards through a crisis, that's when you actually lose that's where it becomes very time heavy. So we were meeting every week talking about the medical practice and where we were going and what our standards were, and we were triaging people at the front and who are we letting in and who are we not,
crisis
how are we dealing with the pharmacy. crisis in the office and how we're managing what's going on in the office. And that time I was on the board of Girl Guide still as well. So for them it was grants and JobKeeper and the whole girl guiding program and how that fits together because that's all face to face. And if you can't do it face to,
how do you do it?
I ended up just going, this is why you probably only should have one board position at a time because nothing like that had ever happened.
Because you do take on different opportunities because you never expect that to all hit at the same
you
time.
Don't ever.
Oh,
And probably now I sit back and go, I'll never happen again.
I know. Fingers crossed.
Fingers
right?
crossed. So I've really enjoyed the medical practice, the board position for the medical practice, and we're still considering. We're always looking, what's next and how because we could we are sure we could expand, and different services. Who else we could bring in, and that's becoming very common in the medical, bigger medical centres that are being built these days. Your radiographers are there. Obviously there. Pharmacy's there, pathology's there,
physio's there.
Physio. You've got usually we've got a dentist,
great,
on site as well. You've got psychologists, physio, everyone, podiatrists, all sorts. So it's keeping that balance and keeping everyone safe as well. And it's just such a moving space at the moment, I think. And what I never appreciated until now is just the government that underpins how all of this works. So we're so structured and dictate, even though we might think we could do all of this, still is underpinned by, the Department of Health and what they let you do.
True.
So really, really interesting stuff.
Recently, you posted on LinkedIn about networking in the age of social distancing. And I have to mention that it was also mentioned in LinkedIn News as well, which is very cool. What has networking in the age of social distancing meant to you?
Yeah, I didn't know LinkedIn News was a thing until this year.
There you go.
And I was quite surprised to see that. But but anyway, it was an interesting article because I didn't realise the way they work that they link a few articles on the same theme, so you can see a few articles and comments and things. So I found that quite interesting because it is something that, particularly here in Adelaide, we're dipping our toe back into the face-to-face networking market. I would have said, if you said, do you like networking? I would have said, no, I hate networking. It's just not what I do and not how I want to spend my time. But I do think networking's got a bit of a bad rap, particularly working through, I started working in the late 90s and through it was all about spending time with people and talking to people, big functions, shaking hands, having a few drinks, all of that sort of stuff. And for a long time it didn't, I spent 3 years in Sydney. So that and that was sort of my late 20s. So that sort of cut me out a bit of that really, your post-qualifications, you're probably a manager, you're sort of starting to think about where you're going to go. And I left Adelaide. And there was no point networking in Sydney. It's because I knew I wasn't going to stay.
Right.
And then came back and then within a year had a baby. So I did fall.
You were out of the
loop. Out of the loop for a long time. And then once I'd had kids, it's interesting. I could say networking, sort of two schools of thought. Networking doesn't work. It's always, 5 till 7 and it doesn't work with kids and family. But it's also not where I wanted to spend my time. So even if I didn't have kids, did I want to go to a function for 2 hours? Probably not. I might have prioritised the gym or going for a walk or something over that anyway. So while I do think there's some issues around networking and timing and it is always tricky, but I know now in particular at work, it's not just tricky for me, it's tricky for everybody who's trying to get kids somewhere. It's not just mums, it's everybody trying to sports and pickups, and so it's always been a bit of a tricky thing. So it was kind of nice to have a year off and not feel any pressure around it, and to and networking just seemed to happen. It happened in our almost in our technical groups, and we had things that we had to do. So you were going to webinars to learn about JobKeeper because that's where we were spending our time. So you're seeing. So while I wasn't networking, I was seeing other people online. I was listening to other people online, asking questions. They were asking questions, some technical things. So we were still doing all of that.
Yeah.
We still had drinks a couple of times. We'd do Zoom drinks on a Friday night. But I did enjoy no pressure and not having to go out, not having to think about it too much. But I must admit, so when I saw this article, I had literally the night before been to a face-to-face networking event, which was the first one for a long time.
Yep.
And would you believe was planned for November, but fell right when we got thrown into the
Oh, no.
second lockdown. So it was deferred to February.
Yes.
I had a really, really good time. And it made me think there's a place for it. And I saw people I knew, caught up with people I haven't seen for a long time. And I met new people. I was quite happy meeting new people and chatting to new people. And everyone's got interesting stories and things to talk about and how their businesses have coped over the last 12 months and what they think is going to happen. So what I'm hoping for is that maybe we get a switch to some really high-quality networking. People value, like I said right at the beginning, if I can keep the balance that I've had for the last 10 months going forward, that'll be great. I don't want a networking event, something to go to every week in my diary or every 2 weeks. I just don't want to. It makes life hard and you have to rejig things.
Everything.
But if you can pull together a networking event like the one I went to Thursday night, which was maybe 40 or 50 people in a room, very similar people and, great people to talk to, then maybe that was a good, there was gin as well, but that was a good start. So instead of a bank that might have a function with lots and, perhaps it's a 20-person
where you get to talk to people more deeply.
Or people think about who's be in the room.
Yeah.
And if, so I would like to introduce you to these 4 people.
Yeah.
So, and of those, I would like to introduce, and you actually end up with high quality smaller groups, because I think smaller groups are a thing that is going to stick. I mean, if someone said to me, come along, there's going to be 150 people, I don't know
be as open.
if I want to be doing that anyway, but I just hoping now it's opened the door to more balance, accepting there's different ways to network and we don't all have to be in the same room doing the same thing at the same time. But when we do, and I am going to spend 2 hours with you doing whatever this networking thing is, that it's not just rocking up and grabbing a glass of wine and walking around the room chatting to people. There's a bit more structure to it. So that's what I'm hoping will come out of this last 12 months. And with like I said, it's not like we're just going to flick a switch and suddenly, functions with hundreds of people are going to become the norm again. It's going to be a little bit different for a little while, I think. So who knows? We'll see. Maybe I need to drive that. Need to arrange a networking.
What is your purpose?
I think my purpose is to make the complicated simple. That's what I spend all day, every day doing, and doing it in a way that doesn't make people feel like they should have known, because seriously, no one should know half the stuff we deal with in tax. But I do think I do a lot of work with female entrepreneurs and females who run their own businesses. Some of them, as a result of, marriage breakdowns, and they've reassessed their lives and have started their own business and following their passion, have worked in big business for a long time, been CEOs, but now want to do their own thing. And I found maybe 8 or 10 years ago, when I started meeting these women and talking to them, that I would say, what's your structure? How's your business structured? And they didn't really know, or if they knew, they didn't understand. And a lot of times someone had just set them up, or they'd gone to their husband's accountant and they just sort of did it. And they didn't have a really good grasp or understanding of why anything was set up the way it was, why I was charging them to do a trust tax return and a company tax return, and why they needed financial statements. And so I really enjoy that side of it. And for a long time, I mean, I think my job for my clients is to help them sleep at night, so they know everything's sort of done and under control, and they're comfortable and happy and know that we're across it. And that's our jobs, to be across it. I work with staff all the time clients will send an email asking a question, and you sort of read the response that someone's drafted and you say, that is all great stuff. But the question that was asked is really a yes or no answer. And we haven't said yes or no in here. Everything that you've written is great for us to keep in our records because that explains how we got to the answer, but we need to get to an answer. And if we can't get to an answer, well, what else do we need to ask, or what else do we need to find out to get to the answer? Because clients don't like long technical emails without an answer, without something telling them yes or no what they should or shouldn't do. And we can't always do that easily, but I think that's got to be our end goal, that clients are happy with, comfortable and confident they've got the right answer. And that we're across it and we're looking after them.
100%. What would you say to your 18-year-old self?
I would say don't take things too personally. And there is a saying which I always butcher. I think it was Mahatma Gandhi who said it, which is something along the lines of, if you can fix it, don't worry about it. And if you can't fix it, don't worry about it. And it's sort of, it has worked for me because, people make mistakes. I've made technical mistakes over the years, and you beat yourself up about it and you think, but, I can fix it. So if I can fix it, I might as well stop being upset about whatever it is that's happened and just fix it because that's what I have to do. Yeah. And if you can't fix it, well, there's really not very much I've actually ever come across that
can't be fixed.
There's and if you can't, you can't. So you just have to manage the consequences or whatever's come out in the end. So, yeah. And, don't forget to have fun. Every now and then.
Take yourself too seriously.
Yes, don't take yourself too seriously. Don't forget to have fun.
Thank you so much for coming in today.
No problems. Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to keep this conversation going in our private Facebook group, Accountants on Purpose. You're welcome to join us there.